Unless you've been living underneath a rock for the last 2 weeks, you've probably heard about this new big scary thing called ChatGPT. Within the programming community, there's a lot of talk right now about how GPT will affect the programmer. In particular, talking about how it will affect a student learning programming, if it will become a new cheat that makes programming harder or easier to learn, and if it will ultimately replace the programmer themselves. I think there's a lot of fear mongering and warmongering going on about like, oh my god, this is going to be the end of programmers as we know it. So I felt it was my responsibility to kind of settle the tensions and show a few examples where it's not exactly perfect and how we're all going to be okay. Just breathe. ChatGPT can have a conversation with you about literally anything. So here is ChatGPT. We get to it by going to this URL here, chat.openai.com. You make an account and you can log in and you can literally ask it anything. So hey there, robot, what is 2 + 2? So that's pretty easy. But what it can also do is have more artistic conversations. You can actually ask it to write you poems, for example. Write me a haiku about the color purple. There you go. Pretty interesting. The one thing in the programming niche that scares people about the OpenAI ChatGPT is the fact that ChatGPT knows how to program. You can actually ask it to solve basic programming problems for you, and it gives you most of the time a right answer. So my prompt that I gave it before was write for me a snippet of JavaScript that prompts the user for a number and alerts double that number. And after a couple of seconds of it talking to you, it will produce the JavaScript that does just that, and it's pretty awesome. And taking this piece of code, we can copy it into a HTML file and test it and see that it does basically what it says that it's supposed to do. So that is pretty interesting. You can also have it solve harder problems like C and assembly. You can have it do things like create for me a socket server in C that listens on port quad 4 forks and says hello to the client over the socket. So after all that, we have what looks like some pretty good C codes. We're gonna actually go ahead and copy that out and we'll compile it and see if it works. So we can take that code, we can compile it into code and then run it. And there we go. See, so it works. Pretty interesting stuff. There are a couple issues with this that I don't see taking over the human being in the next 5 or so years. So first of all, the code we got generated is good, but there is a bug in the code where if you just go ahead and restart the server, because you don't actually use the sock reuse address flag on your bind socket, the server is inherently broken. So what does that mean for the future of learning and the future of programming as a whole? In my opinion, the ChatGPT bot does to learning to program what Google Translate and Babbelfish did to learning a new language back in the day. It is there, it is an interesting tool, and I think it does have power in helping the student overcome hurdles that they may not have been able to do before without it. I can go on here and I can essentially use this like a new Stack Overflow. How do you do this kind of thing in language X? Just like on Babbelfish or Google Translate, you could ask, how do you say library in Spanish? Just like that, if I went onto Google Translate and I said, how do I have a full conversation in Spanish, I don't actually learn the ins and outs of the language. The only way you can learn a language is by trying, failing, learning, and then retrying. And this chat API does not do that at all. For the engineer or the computer programmer that is concerned about the chat GPT replacing them in their job, there are a lot of instances with the chat GPT where it produces bad code. As you saw in this example here, the code did not revive a restart. There are a lot of little ins and outs of programming that the chat AI is just not exactly ready for yet. Is the future going to be AI generated code? No, not at all. I think we are at least a decade away from that. But is the future going to be a human writing code that is assisted by AI? Yes, but I would argue we've already been there for the last 5 or so years based on things like GitHub Copilot. So let me know your thoughts in the chat, in the comments down below, and then go watch this video about some cool code that I wrote without AI. See you there.